we'll go ahead and get started. Again, there's a poll question. I'll kind of reveal what that looks like on the who are you in just a moment. But let me just introduce myself and we'll talk about the agenda and then hop right into it. So my name's Brian Thomas. I'm a National Account Manager with TCI. I've been with TCI for almost 16 years and former classroom teacher, taught middle school and used History Live extensively in my classes. With me, and you'll hear him perhaps at different points, we've got some TCI personnel on the line that are going to be assisting me, Christy Sanders, Kimberly Hagan, and Sarah Kumar. So from time to time, you may hear them as well, especially on questions that you have. So let's do a little housekeeping, especially because this is a webinar format. We want to make sure that you are familiar with the tools that are there. So if you could, questions. When you have a question, and you're thinking, hey, I really want to ask Brian this question, then please make sure that you use the Q&A on Zoom and not the chat. Chat we may use for something else as we're going through, but we're going to use the Q&A for any question. So it's really important. If you've got a question, don't use chat, use the Q&A, and we'll be answering those throughout our time today. Now, I know one of the questions that we received on our registration that many people have, always have anytime that we do a webinar is, Brian, are you going to be recording this? Yes, we are going to record this meeting, and tomorrow morning you'll wake up, there'll be an email magically in your email box that will have the recording for today's webinar inside there, and you'd be able to share that with your colleagues if you'd like. So who are you? Well, let me end the poll and tell you a little bit about you in terms of a webinar audience. So it looks like most of you are middle school teachers, almost half of you, actually a little bit better than half, and most of you are evenly split in terms of your experience with TCI. About a third of you have taught it more than 2 years, and a third of you between 1 and 2, and a third of you only since the beginning of March because of the pandemic. And that's really exciting. So we really like to see people across the spectrum inside here. And we probably, if I asked a third question, we probably have both social studies and science represented in our webinar today. So agenda, what are we going to cover? So the 4 main things that I want to go over with you today in talking about TCI and Google is we're going to look at how students sign up and end with Google. We'll also talk and look at how you save materials to Google Drive. We'll look at and focus on creating assignments that would show up inside your Google Classroom accounts. And then we'll also talk about sharing links via Google Classroom, as well as other ideas on how you might be able to use Google with TCI. So without any further delay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my camera so that I can get it out of the way and we can use the full screen here. I want to get right into using TCI with Google and begin with the students, because the very first thing that you'll either do next fall, or perhaps you've already looked to do, especially if you're getting ready to use TCI, is to have your students be able to log in and use Google as a login process. So what I'm going to do is to model everything that we do today, we're going to do it live. And so I'm going to use a teacher subscription and I'm going to use a student subscription to demonstrate all of this. Now, the program I'm going to use is our America's Past program. It's an upper elementary U.S. history program. However, if you teach 5th grade science or you teach middle school science, the properties, everything that I'm going to be showcasing today work exactly the same. Nothing's going to change. But as you can see right here is as a teacher account, I have this 5th grade program, but I don't have any students currently enrolled in my class. Now, if, let's say it's August rolls around and students are coming back into school and I want them to log into my TCI account, but I want them to use Google to do so. I don't want to sit down and hand enter all these student accounts. How do I go about doing that? So I'm going to model that for you. What you're going to do is you're going to have your students actually go to our main website, which is teachtci.com. That is our main website, teachtci.com, and you're going to have them start by clicking Student Sign In. Now, if they have never had a TCI account, then what they'll need to do initially is to click Create Account, and they'll sign up with Google. Thereafter, when they've signed in, they'll be able to click Sign In with Google just from TCI's account, and let me show you what happens. So I'm going to, actually I should back out here so that you can see how that takes place. So if I'm logged in as I'm getting help here. All right, so if I click, I want to create an account. I'm going to sign up with Google. I have a student account called I'm Getting Help at teachtci.com. So it's bypassed me having a little pop-up screen where I put that in. But essentially, there's a little pop-up where the students put in their Google credentials. But then they're going to have to put in your email or your username. So I have an email address of bthomas@teachtci.com. Please mark that down if you would like to send gifts to me after the webinar today. And once I tab down, I can see that Mr. Thomas has this class right here, America's Past. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to choose that class. Now, if you had multiple bells, then there would be a drop down and they'd be able to cycle through and find the correct section. And when the student clicks submit, they'll be able to log into that class. Now thereafter, what's going to happen, and I'll sign out of IMA here, thereafter, anytime that they come to teachtci.com and they're signed in to Google, when they click Student Sign In and they sign in with Google, it will do all the work for them and they'll automatically be loaded into the correct class. So you can sign in with Google really simply, really easily. It literally only takes a couple minutes, even the very first time that you use Google with the students in getting their accounts created. But beyond that, thereafter, it's really simple for them to be able to go there, click sign in with Google, and boom, they're in and done. So I'm going to stop and pause right there and kind of throw it over to Christy, if I could ask you, any questions come in on the sign-in portion for students on what I just modeled right there? Christy, I don't hear you. You might be on mute.
I am. I apologize. So the question is, how do students get associated with a class?
So again, to get associated with a specific class, I'll see if I can model it with a different student this time. Actually, I probably need, I'm guessing that they mean by section. So if I had a second class here, so as a teacher, let's say I had a second section. So I need to add that in here. So I'm going to create a new class. We'll also call this one America's Past. But I'm going to make this one period 2. Oops. 2. There we go. And so if I wanted a student to be in period 2 instead of period 1, when they go and they log in, whoops, let me log out of IMA here, and I'm going to, I think I need to close that incognito window completely so IMA is not associated with it anymore, and then open a brand new one. Here we go. teachtci.com, student sign in, and then I'm going to click create account. We're going to hit sign in with Google, or sign up with Google. This is where they have to put in those credentials. So we're going to do willadethomas@gmail.com, and then I'm going to put in his password. Great. Now it's going to ask me to put in the teacher name and email. All right. So this is where he would put in my email address. And then once he hits tab right here, actually what will end up happening is that there will be a drop-down list, and Aiden is, my son Aiden's already tied into his school account. That was a bad example there. But Christy, whoever asked that question, once they hit tab, if they're in the same district, what happens is that there's a drop down on this class list and that you just have them select that second bell instead of the first. I apologize. I'd forgotten that Aiden's account's tied in with his regular school, so I can't have him tied in with me. But that's how they do it. Any other questions on that student sign-in portion?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of them. So the first one is, if my students already log in through Clever at this point, can they also do this through Google Classroom at this time?
Great question.
So
if your kids already log in through,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, if they're already logging in through Clever, I wouldn't do anything different. Have them log in through Clever, because actually that's probably going to be more consistent across class bells, right? They're probably not just using Clever for TCI social studies. They may be using it for their language arts or their math or whatever the other classes would be. So just so that they don't conflict, I would keep it with the one and have them use Clever if that's the case.
And then the second one is if we've been using TCI and they've been signed up, do we need to do something for the students now to have them sign in with Google?
No, the first time if they, since they already have an account, when they click sign in with Google, that's when they'll actually create a connection between their existing TCI account and their Google account. But it doesn't take any longer than what I just showcased there. I mean, it's really fast. But yeah, they can still link that together. And it is really important that the students are logged into TCI when they're using Google, because that's going to become important a little bit later on, especially when we're talking about Google Classroom and assignments and links that you might post in your classroom stream. So making sure that the students are logged in is really critical, because if not, any links that they click on from Classroom Stream, if they're not currently signed into TCI, will take them right to their login page where they'd have to log in before being able to get to the actual link itself. So that is an important thing to take care of. Christy, anything else on sign in?
There's a couple more. So if a student is using a parent's computer and not signed into their school Google account, will they be able to sign into TCI with the sign in with Google button?
Yes, but what you should tell that student to do is, just like I did, make sure you go to an incognito window. If you're not familiar, well, and that's Chrome. I know Firefox has its own private browser and Safari has its own. They each call themselves something different, but like Google Chrome has a private browser called Incognito, where you could go in and actually log in with different credentials than what's on the regular browser. Because if they're using their parent's computer, it's likely that parent has an account already, and you don't want to screw it up. So that's the best bet, is for them to do it through an incognito window.
Okay, so this one is, what is the benefit of logging in through Google? And I think, can you also just make sure we're really clear on, if a district is already rostering through a certain rostering method, that they should still continue to log in that way versus if it's a Google login?
Yeah, absolutely. I can only add emphasis to what you just said. If they're already using Clever, or they're using some single sign-on token that has already been set up by the district, then don't abandon that to have the students use Google Sign In at any point. They should not do that. Use Clever, because you don't want to create a conflict between those systems. So if it's been set up and they're already logging in through Clever, or again, some single sign-on token, then you keep that up. This would only be for the many users that are out there that perhaps don't have that set up. And the reason that you'd want to be able to use something like that is so that a kid would be able to literally click just a button and sign in pretty quickly. So if they've already put their Google credentials in a computer, and I'll show you again. So I'm going to put in I'm getting help at gmail.com. There we go. Then I got to put in her password, if I can remember it. Perfect. So after they've logged into a computer and they come to any website where it says sign in with Google, they need only click that button and it would boom, take them right there. Now, if they've not signed in with their Google credentials, they would have to have done what I just did there. But thereafter, as long as I'm on this browser and I've not logged out of my Google credentials elsewhere, if I just click this button right here, it's going to automatically log me into America's Pass without having to do anything else because it already recognizes me as IMA. That's why you might use it. And again, if you're using Clever, you're using something else to sign in, keep that up. Christy, any last questions before I go ahead and move on?
Yeah, there's just two more. This one's an FYI from one of our participants, and she said if you don't want to have your students go incognito, tell them to add account in Google. So up in the upper corner, right corner of your screen where the avatar is, they can have multiple accounts signed in at the same time, i.e. multiple kids in the home, parents, Google accounts. So
yes, yeah. That's a great tip.
And then the second one is, and you've already covered this, but well, I don't think you've covered on this level, but is there a way for teachers to enroll their students into the TCI by using their school Gmail accounts?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. So you've been showing how students would go in and sign in with Google.
Yes.
But the question is there a way for teachers to enroll their students into the class by using their school Gmail accounts?
You mean just manually creating student accounts?
Yeah, I think that's where, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can totally create the accounts on your own if you want. So like you click on My Classes, and then from Actions, you click on Manage Students. And when you're first doing it, initially, the screen will be blank on that page. What you do is you click Add Student. And then there's 4 different options in terms of being able to get students into an account. One would be to hand enter them. So you can hand enter them one at a time. Now, why might you do that? If it's early elementary teacher, that probably would be the easiest way to go. If you have a school where you've got science, but you've now added TCI social studies, and there's already student accounts existing for science, you could look up students' names just by typing them in there. And if they already had a TCI account, you could actually add them over into your social studies class. Another one would be to do a batch import, and that while this page looks more complicated than what it is, it's not difficult at all. There's 4 simple steps that you follow. We give you a little template and a code that's really important. You complete that and it creates all the student accounts. And then of course the last one being that you have the students sign themselves up, which is what I already modeled. So yeah, you can create student accounts completely different. And yet there's even, if that's not enough, there is one other one that we've been referring to, is that there's rostering methods that are out there, Clever, OneRoster, and others that will actually be able to create student rosters and classes for you. All right.
Brian,
Yes.
there's a couple, there's just 2 clarifications. So while you're on the screen, there was a question about setting student passwords. So can you go back to where you were managing students and just show where that is very quickly?
Yeah, so you can get back that way, and let me give you guys a little tip right here. You'll see this area right up here. This is called bread trail. We're going to follow the breadcrumbs back to just students. So I don't have to click on My Classes. I can just click on the students and it takes me back right here. So if you do have a student that's forgotten their password or whatever, if you need to edit a student account, essentially, you can go in there. It won't tell you what their old password is, but you can set a new one for them. Or if you need to edit specific abilities for that particular student, that's on that page. Now there is something, if you've not been on this page in a while, but you've been using TCI, and I know a third of you anyway have been using TCI for better than 2 years, you're going to see a brand new tool on this particular page, which I can talk about here momentarily. But that's how you actually go back and change student passwords. Christy, did that answer that question?
Yep. And then I don't know the answer, otherwise I would have just typed this, but I think it's a district rostering question. The question is, what about signing in with Google Piece? Can teachers set this up for them? So can individual teachers set up the Google sign-in for their own students, which I think is a rostering. We do that through rostering, correct?
Yeah, we do that through rostering. So that would be a good question to send us afterwards, so that our software team can give a more specific answer to that particular question. All
That's
right.
it. So now,
So, all right. But since I'm here, I might as well show you guys right here in case you've not already played with it right here. Let's say you got that kid, Donald Duck, got anger issues that when he's always in the principal's office, and he tells you, hey, Mr. Thomas, I did that homework, but it's not saving for whatever reason. We've got this brand new little tool that we released last week. We are super pumped about, called Sign In as a Student. Essentially, you just click it from that My Classes page, and you're able to actually log in as that student and see exactly what they see inside their subscription. And just in case you don't have any questions about it, we put it right up here in green. You're signed in as that student. Any changes that you make could overwrite their work. But if they tell you they've done something, you could actually log in as that student and see it right there. So plenty of brand new tools that we've been releasing to deal with the pandemic and everything else that you'll be able to utilize. So the next thing that we want to make sure that we cover with you is materials, because that's a big part of every TCI science and social studies lesson, are the materials that students may need to have access to. So one of my favorite lessons in this program is the lesson on how and why Europeans came to the New World. I love this lesson because the students pretend to be underwater archaeologists. We call it the sunken ship lesson affectionately within TCI, because the students pretend to be underwater archaeologists excavating the remains of a sunken explorer ship. There's these really great images that come on placards that students need to be able to view. What happens if I want to be able to share those with my students using Google? How do I go about doing that? So I'm going to showcase anytime that there is a PDF, whether it's a handout, notebook, placard, in this case, picture card, whatever you want to call those, there is a way in which you can share them directly with students into Google Classroom. And so I'm going to model that right now by going into that particular lesson. And then I want to click on materials right over here. So when I click on materials, it's going to take me, and if I happen to be in the wrong chapter, I can navigate to the right one right there. But I'll see all the materials for that particular chapter. Here's what I was talking about. Let me show you these gorgeous images right here of potatoes, tobacco plants, the Bible. We've got gold. I need some of that. We've got some artwork that's there, the flag. We've got a map. We've got a compass, and we also have an astrolabe. So these different artifacts students are pulling up from the remains of a sunken explorer ship come on these placards. And if I wanted to share those with my students so that they had them on their Chromebook, let's say, or their iPad, how would I go about doing that? So one thing I could do is I could download them if I wanted to. I could, click print and download it to my computer and then go over to my Google Classroom and then create something and have it shared there. I could do that, but I actually don't have to. All I need to do is to click right over here in that row where it says Actions, click Save to Google Drive. And initially what you're going to see is that it picks up that you have a Google Drive account, obviously, but I don't want it going into my Google Drive account. I want it going into my Classroom Drive account. So I'm going to change the designation, and I'm just going to type the word Classroom right up here. And when I type in Classroom, any of the classes that I have set up in Google Class would then appear right here. Here's my social studies class. I'm going to click on these superstar nerds that I've got for social studies and select that. And then I'm going to save it. So you can see the designation now is for that Google Drive account for Classroom. I'm going to click Save. And once those are there, I'll be able to go over to my Google Classroom account. And if I go into my classwork and then to our Classroom Drive folder, I'll see that there as well as all the others that I've shared with students in our general classroom account drives. So you're able to share materials directly into Google Classroom's Drive account right from our materials page. Now, again, what's the other workaround to it? If your preference would be to have a particular handout show up as part of an assignment, then what you would do is go ahead and download that PDF and upload it when you go ahead and do the clip on creating your assignment within Classroom. So you could do it the other way around, but just know that you can share things right directly to your Google Classroom Drive account right there. Questions on that? Kimberly, maybe I'll pick on you this time. Kimberly, do we have questions that have come in on what I just modeled there?
No, right now you're doing good on those parts.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. All right, so then I'm ready to go ahead and get a little bit more direct into Google Classroom by taking a look at where you would do that. So for creating an assignment within Google Classroom, you can do it directly from TCI when it is the text. So right now, when you click text from your sidebar, right over here, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner this Google Classroom icon appear. And let's say, for example, that we're doing this chapter, and I want the students to read a little bit about underwater archaeology tonight before class tomorrow, because class tomorrow is where we're going to have everybody be the sunken ship archaeologists. So I want them to have a good foundation, so I'm going to have them read this section tonight, do the check for understanding, and be ready tomorrow for this really great activity. So if I wanted to create that assignment within Classroom, how can I do that right from TCI? So I'm going to click the icon right here, Share to Google Classroom. And from there, it's going to ask me to choose which class. Again, I've got 3 different classes. I've got a science class. I've got a social studies class. So I'm going to pick my social studies class here. And then I'm going to choose what type of an action that I want to do with this assignment. Do I want it to be an assignment within Classroom? And I do, but you could, if you wanted to, just ask a question, make an announcement, or create a material. Any of those 4, you can create a direct link that will take the students right here if you wanted to. But I'm going to create an assignment. So I'm going to click that one, and then I hit go, and I get this pop-up window there where then I'm going to go ahead and put in my directions. So I'm going to have them read section 1 and complete. Check for understanding. Now, this is really important. So everybody stop, focus, look intently on this box on the screen. I want your nose about 2 inches away from the screen while I do this, because I think this is a really important procedure. Step 1, what do I need them to do? They need to make sure they are logged in to TCI. Before they do anything else, I want to make sure they log into TCI. Step 2, click the link, and away you go. So that's it. I want to make sure that step 1 is always the same. Make sure that they log into TCI, because again, I don't want them to have any friction between clicking that link and going directly to section 1 right here. So it's really important that I go ahead and I put that as a step so that I get in my students' mind every time that we provide a link for them that they need to make sure that they're logged into their account. Then I can worry about how many points I'm going to make it worth. I'm going to make it worth 10,000 points. And then I'm going to give it a due date, and I'm going to give it a due date of tomorrow because I'm that teacher. And then the topic, if I've created topics or whatever, I can assign it. And then
Brian,
yes.
Before you hit assign,
Ah!
so there's a question that just came up twice. Can you share
Yes.
one assignment to multiple classes? So on that page where you were just at, could you assign it to multiple classes at the same time?
That's a good question. I do not know. I don't
think you can.
I don't think you can. Yeah. No, it looks like it's just the one right now. Now that would be a good help or a good wish list item. So, you know, since we, at least Christy and I, do not believe that we can do that right now, if you ever encounter something, you've got a question on it, and you want like TCI to hop on that right away, go up to your name in the upper right-hand corner, click on this little help area right there, and from that help area, you'll see where you can give us product feedback, whether it's a question or if you've got an idea. It creates a ticket, and we actually have this really great customer success team that is super responsive and making sure that you know, we answer the question as thoroughly as we can, and then also provide that feedback that you're giving them to our developers, whether they're content or software developers, so that we can include those features later on. Sarah is our marketing person. She's on here. Sarah, you know, from teachers using product feedback, we've added a lot of features just within the last month and a half. Besides the sharing, signing in as a student, Sarah, what are some other things that we've added just because teachers have shared it as feedback? Can you tick off, say, a couple?
Well, I think student view was like one of the more recent features that we added. I mean, it was already on a product roadmap, but because of distance learning and because a lot of teachers like requested a feature, we kind of expedited that. Our product team and software team expedited that feature, and we rolled it out as a beta feature, and we're going to be adding enhancements to it, and also grading improvements. We rolled out a lot of updates to our grading feature as well, and that's again from feedback from our customers, from teachers. It was already on a product roadmap, but again, we just expedited it because we wanted to like roll it out for our teachers right now.
And Brian, we've had a lot of teachers like respond that says you can reuse the assignment that you assigned in Google Classroom from one of your classes to another. So you should be able to post. You can just reuse the post for other classes without having to retype everything. So
Awesome.
All of your help.
Oh, awesome. That's great. So let's have one of those folks actually put that in chat for others, just in case there's some folks on here that don't know how to do that. If somebody could undertake that and type that in to share with your colleagues, that would be great, if they've not already done that. Now, once you actually do have that within Classroom and its assignment, I always like to click classwork because it kind of gives me a view of what it looks like from a student perspective when they would see it. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm logged into my TCI account here as a teacher, I'm going to model for you what happens when they click that link when they're logged into their account. So that I can do that, I'm gonna need to copy that URL right there. So I'm going to copy that link address, and then I'm going to go back over to where I was signed in as a student, back over here. And so if they click that link in Classroom, it would be like putting that URL that I just typed up in there and then hitting return. It's going to take them immediately to that specific section. So that little link that's there for Google Classroom at the top of each one of the pages, whoops, need to navigate back to the text, but it's going to be there at each one of the pages within the student text. So any chapter that you go to, any section that you go to, you've got a direct little link that you can create an assignment for in Classroom. Now, having said that, I'm going to show you one other thing with the links up here in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to see if there's any follow-up questions on what I just demonstrated with the share to classroom feature right there. So Kimberly, any follow-up questions on that?
I don't see any on that one.
Okay.
Special thanks to our participants for like being super helpful to each other and like sharing how to reuse posts. That's fabulous.
That's great. Awesome. Well, now, the other thing I want to point out is while this Google Classroom icon is here for the text, watch what happens when I go over to the lesson game. Sadly, right now, it's not there. Now, we may add that, and we'll certainly put that in as a wish list. In fact, we've seen a lot of teachers do that already. But right now, it's not there. Now, so what that means is I can't create a direct assignment within Google Classroom from TCI on this page. However, you absolutely still can have the students go directly to this page. How do you do that? You grab the URL that's at the top. This link right here, you can copy that link and create a post inside your Google Classroom where you include that link. Let's say I'm going to create a new assignment, complete lesson game. Christy, what's step one? What's one going to be?
Sign in to TCI.
There we go. Sign in to TCI. And then to click and win, because I want them to win. But I need to go ahead and then add my link. And I paste it right inside there. Add that link. And now it's there with it. Again, point values, all of that. Go ahead and give it a due date of Friday, let's say on that one there. Not going to put it with a topic or anything like that. And then I'm ready to go ahead. And I can assign it to all students. I can assign it across those different classes. There we go. That's where it is. I see now. So I can assign it across to those different classes. And then once it's assigned, again, the students would be able to click on that link, and inside of their subscription or their website, whatever, wherever they are, when they click on that link, it should take them right to the lesson guides, lesson game, and there it is. So anything, and here's the key, and I'm going to have you get 2 inches away with your nose again one more time. So I'm going to come back over here, and I want you to look at this purple area over here. In fact, I'm going to zoom in. Anything that has a green dot, anything that has the green dot are things that your students have access to when they have a TCI subscription. So if you wanted to send your students to the vocabulary cards for a chapter, grab the link. Could be a completely different chapter. The little URL is unique to each one of the pages. So you're able to pick very specific pages and share those links so that when students click them, they're able to get right where they need to go. Christy, any questions on Google Classroom in terms of what I just shared there?
This is a little bit, I was going to type of an answer, but it might be quicker for you just to explain it. So if they're already signed into TCI, why would they need to go back to Classroom for the assignment link? Can't they just click on the chapter and read the assigned section? So they
totally.
Yep.
Yeah, they totally could. But Jesse, they may not be right there. I mean, I've sat over my kid's shoulder here as they've been doing distance learning, and you know, they're all over the place sometimes. But you know, when they go back to you know, one of the places that Aiden is always in, regardless of his classes for Coleraine, is which is his school, is Google Classroom. So he's able to go there and be able to click on those links, and then, you know, it takes him to wherever he needs to be on his browser. So that's why it's a great tool for a student to be able to have access to. Now, having said that, absolutely, students able to navigate to whatever they need to if they're already inside the TCI subscription. For that matter, you could create assignments that only exist within TCI using our assignment platform right here. So you could totally do that. It's just that the added benefit, if you're using Google Classroom, is having that link right there. It's likely that that's something that the students are probably more apt to look at when it comes to assignments and links and things like that. And then Christy, any other questions?
Nope, I'm just responding to this one. Kimberly, did you have one? Sorry.
There's one about following the link to the game. Each student gets their own game assigned, and
Yes.
they see the results.
That's right. You would see the results inside your gradebook. So for example, right now when I click on, and I'll go back to lesson 4 here. Right now for lesson 4, there's no results for either Donald or Ima. But if I come back and I'm Donald and I answer just even one of these questions, we'll just take the first 2. So there I've answered a question, and then as a teacher, what's happening on your side is if I go back and I refresh, I'll see, there it is. There's his score, and I can drill inside and see exactly what he thought the answer was initially before he got it right on the second attempt. So you're able to view that data individually for a student, even reset the score for them if you feel that's necessary. It's dated and time-stamped right there. And if that weren't enough, as your students complete those lesson games or the assessments, you even have a little button up here called View Trends, which is an item analysis tool, and it shows you what percentage of your students answered those questions correctly on the first attempt. And if you have one that's kind of low like this one and that one right there, then you know you're not looking at a performance issue. It's likely that you're focusing on an instructional gap. So you absolutely, the students will be able to play their own lesson game, and they would even be able to, you'd be able to see that data right there.
Brian, we just had another question come in about the lesson game.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the students being able to restart it, or do we have to do it, which is a big area in the settings a lot of times.
That's right. So the way my settings are set up right now is that Donald would be able to go back and restart this game. Let's say he plays it the first time through and he got an 8 out of 13 because there's actually a final question as well with this one. So that's not good, and he wanted to restart it. He could click on restart and it refreshes it. Now, not every teacher wants the students to be able to go in and restart on their own. So if you want to change that behavior and other behaviors, what you want to do is become familiar with our settings area in there. So when you click into settings, you'll see that there are things called student views and features, and then grades. And what this one kind of deals with is, I'm on the wrong one there. Here we go. On the student views and features, you'll see it right here, restart lesson game. So I've got mine set on so that students could restart it on their own. But if I hit off here and then update, and then since I'm logged in as Donald on the other side there, let me refresh that page, and I bet that button ends up going away. It's gone. There it is. So now, whatever Donald gets, that's what he gets. That's what goes inside the gradebook, and the only person that would then be able to reset it would be me. And again, to change that, you go to settings, you go to student views and features, and then you toggle that right there. Now, so there are other things on that settings page which you could toggle on or off for your students depending on what you want. But that's definitely one of them that we've added inside there. Christy, any other questions?
Yeah, but there's one I know you'll answer, and it's just about being able to see when students do the work where it goes to.
Okay.
And then can you only reset certain students as differentiation for the lesson game?
So right now, this tool operates as a universal tool. So meaning it applies to every student that's inside this America's Pass subscription. You'll see some of these currently have the ability of being universal or have the ability to be able to edit at an individual level. So while right now that's universal for restarting the lesson, that may change, and it's really going to depend on the feedback that we get from teachers like you. So if that's a feature that you'd like to see or have the ability of toggling on or off for students as a modification or differentiation, then definitely, again, go to your name, click on help, and just very quickly share that with us via product feedback and say, hey, I'd like to be able to have the ability to toggle on or off the ability for students to restart the lesson game individually.
However, Brian, isn't there when you've gone into a student, you can if you have it closed off, so if you have restart the lesson game off and a student has taken it, if you go into the grades, you can individually reset lesson game score as a teacher.
Correct.
Be able to do it, but the teacher could do that if you wanted to for differentiation.
That's right. So as soon as like Donald answers one of these questions here, again, it was B was the correct response. I'd already forgotten that in 2 minutes time. So I go back over and as a teacher, click on grades. Again, refresh just real quick. There's his score. If I needed to go in there, what Christy's talking about, I can reset Donald's score right from there if I need. And you can also reset globally as a whole class too, just by clicking clear all. Ladies, any other questions on that? We didn't expect to cover lesson games this in depth as what we just did.
Nope, there's no other questions that I've seen so far.
Awesome. Okay. I still like being able to answer any questions that you guys have. So there's one last thing I wanted to be able to share, and that is that teachers have found very creative ways to be able to use Google and Google Classroom and Google Drive, especially during the pandemic. And so the main reason that people use TCI doesn't really have anything to do with our textbooks. While we have really great textbooks, has nothing to do with our awesome digital platform, and it's great, but that's not why people adopt TCI and use TCI. It's because of that word right there, alive. It's those activities, those investigations in our science that really get the students jazzed up, get them excited, and that's why people love to use our program. So of course, one of the challenges that many teachers have had during the pandemic is, all right, Brian, there's all these great activities, but how do I do this lesson? How do I do these activities and be able to modify it for distance learning? And how would that be able to apply over to, say, Google Classroom and Google Drive? So one of the things that we have done as account managers, Kimberly, Christy, myself, 7 others of us as well, have been going through all of our lessons for science and social studies and looking for ways that we can provide you tips as a teacher on how you can do the activities, but modify them for distance learning or for a blended learning. So in some cases like this one, there's a grab and go lesson provided for me in the elementary that I can use called a read and do right here. So if I click on distance learning tips right here and I see there's a grab and go social studies lesson that's a read and do, and I wanted to be able to do it, it's telling me I need to look over in the materials and there's a PDF there for me. So if I click over in materials and go to that lesson, here it is right there. And I go over to actions. If you remember, I can share this directly to my Classroom Drive account. I just click in here, add in Classroom, pick my class after it appears right there, and then select it, and then go ahead and save it. I'm able to provide even a distance learning tool that my students can use already that TCI has built for me. So K5, we have these read and do's for every chapter. I think that's right. Kimberly, Christy, that's correct, right? Read and do's for each one, right?
Yeah, for K5, yes.
Okay, so K5 are in there. And even with some of the others, you'll find from time to time different materials that you might want to be able to share with students. You know, anything that has the green dots, don't forget, you can share them directly as links inside of Google Classroom. And if it's a PDF, you're able to share them. And if that's not enough, one last thing I want to be able to share with everyone right now, and I'm going to do this via a link in chat right now, is when it comes to modifying lessons and activities, there's other ideas, especially like when you're doing a lesson that's built around discussion. Let's say that you're teaching a class and they're doing a discussion activity either within science or social studies, and you wanted to be able to share some of the prompts with them. We're going to put some tips inside of here when you're doing those types of lessons that you'd be able to utilize. So I'm going to go over to chat right now. And while these say social studies, response groups, we call that in social studies a strategy for discussions, but you do discussions in science. Or problem-solving group work, those are engineering challenges in our science program. Writing takes place in both of the programs. Both of them will have times where there's body kinesthetic components to it, or students are working on skills, or students have lessons that utilize a lot of visuals. So if that's the case, then let me provide you guys a link right here with some tips that you'd be able to use that are concrete and would even provide some additional tools that are out there, many of them free for teachers right now, especially during the pandemic. So hopefully that would be helpful. So that's kind of a bonus for you today.
And then Brian, can we just put a plug for science in there? So just like you had the K5 read and do for social studies, we have super simple science for K5 science.
How about I model that, Christy? How about I do that? So let me go over here, add the first grade, go to the little cheetah right there. And then what Christy's talking about, so within the science program, when you open up your investigation and you go to your materials link right there, you'll see that there is a super simple science. Here it is, right down here. And again, it's the modeling is exactly the same that we saw before. So I'm going to go ahead and change my designation. Got to remember, I'm doing this one for my science class now. So I'm going to want to put it in that class. Here we go. And I'm going to go, well, that's first grade, but they're going to be in my 7th grade science class for right now anyway. I'm going to select it, and then I hit save, and boom. I can save that super simple science. And if you don't know what that looks like, it might help if I opened it up, right? So these really great little articles with little investigations that students can do with themselves or with a parent at home right there. They're awesome. Love those. Christy, Kimberly, any other questions on Google and TCI?
Not specifically Google, but if you want to answer a question of going to text with notes for me. Just the question is about how do we get to text level B?
So, well, text level B, really important to note, is for any of our social studies and science programs, grades 2, and this is grade 1, so it's not here, you don't see it. It's grades 2 through 8. So we don't currently support K1, and we don't currently support 9-12 when it comes to level B. But to model that for you, let me go back over here to the social studies because that's 5th grade in there. And if I click on text, when your students see this little tool right there, reading level A, that is on grade level. So it means it fits within the Lexile range for the average 5th grader. If I go to B here, it's about 75% of that range. So it's a lower level. So currently, the students can matriculate back and forth on their own. It doesn't lock them in, and you don't currently have a way to lock them into an A or a B level. That may change at some point. We've been getting feedback from teachers that they would like to be able to have a student already in level B per se. But that's how you do that currently, is you click on that little tool right there.
Hey, Brian, can you give us a highlight of what those fabulous buttons are right there?
Kimberly, do you mean the buttons that are up here?
I do mean those ones.
All right. So we got the reading level one. Then you have the play.
Europeans came to the New World.
So that play will be able to read it. Now, for whatever reason, as a teacher, I turned off the ability for my students to have Spanish in here. So I'm going to go back and turn that back on, make sure I've got it on and update. And that way, when Donald is in his text and he goes there, he should be able to then click into Spanish and then be able to see the text in Spanish. And even if he wants, he can then thereafter hit play and have it read aloud in Spanish, which is super awesome. We've had this tool right here, and I'm going to actually use a different section for that. I'm going to go to this section on wealth. And we've had this, what we call a main idea viewer for several years now. What it's awesome for is it's a great literacy coaching tool. Sometimes it's nice to be able to provide the students a different reading level, certainly, but oftentimes as a teacher, our role is to coach students up, not coach down. And so this is a great coaching tool because it will point out what are the key ideas within that section of text. If you marry that, Kimberly, to this tool right here, which allows the students to be able to mark up the text, it's even better. It's like peanut butter and jelly. It's being able to highlight it, mark it up. I can take off that main idea viewer, and now I've got that main idea right there in my own markup, which I could have put in one of 3 different colors. I can hide that highlight tool, but anytime click it and it comes back. The other thing that highlight tool does is right down here in the reference area that the student would be able to click into the My Notes area, and there's their note dated and timestamped. And if you think back to what I shared earlier, reason this is super awesome, and we're going to try it right now. We're going to go in the lab. We're going to practice this right now. So I think Donald's in my first period class. I'm going to log in as Donald right now. It's warning me, don't make any changes. And then if I go to, what was it, chapter 4, I should be able to click on that section, wealth, and see, did Donald have any highlights? So why didn't it do that? That's interesting.
But if you go to his notes, does it show?
It didn't. Maybe I wasn't signed in as Donald. Was I signed in as Donald
Oh.
over here?
Or were you Ima?
Oh, I'm Ima. That's why. Like,
Yeah.
why am I not seeing Donald's notes? Thank you very much. So I need to get back. Thank you, Kimberly, for asking that. And then go to my classes one more time. So go to my classes. Then go to first bell. Ima. There we go. Click on Ima, hit sign in. And let's see. Now if I go down to section, chapter 4, section on wealth, drum roll. There it is. It's right there. And if I click on my notes, it's right there too. Super awesome. Very cool tool that we've got that in there. Ladies, any last questions before we finish out our time?
Yeah, just really quickly, how similar is tomorrow's webinar on distance learning going to be compared to this one?
That's a good question. I'm not going to be the facilitator for tomorrow, so I can't give you an exact agenda. My guess is they're going to probably go over, definitely they'll go over the sharing slides feature and some of those distance learning tips. They'll probably go a little bit more in depth. Christy, Kimberly, can you guys add any meat to the bones of that question?
I mean, we'll have Google Classroom on there, I'm sure, but it's not going to be the main purpose of the meeting tomorrow. I think it's going to be more showing all the different, you highlighted the distance learning tips, but I think we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that you showcased today.
Yeah. And Janet, I see your question about assessments and perhaps doing a whole webinar on assessments. So Sarah, take note of that. That would be something potentially we'd be able to do at some point. But with any of the assessments, Janet, real quick, if you want to stay on, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about assessments. We'll focus on that for a few minutes for you and for anybody else that might be interested with it. But for the others of you, one last thing I want to talk about right before you leave is at the top of everybody's program content page. You should have this link up here called Distance Learning Support. And folks, there's some really great resources that are available for you 24/7 right there. I think one of the best things to come out of what we've been going through at TCI is having a closer connection with the teachers using our programs. And no better place than I can think of is our Facebook support group. So I'll put a little plug in there for that. It's a great place for you to go in and be able to not just share feedback with us, but to also share feedback and ideas with each other as you guys were doing in the chat. So you'll find that along with some really other great ideas. The other thing I want to make sure I say before most of you drop off is that we are recording today's webinar and it will be shared with you tomorrow morning when you log in. So thank you. Janet, if you want to stick around, I'll focus on some questions on assessment and then we'll call it a day. But if those of you who you feel good at this point, you need to drop off, you can go ahead and do so.
And Brian, anyone that wants to sign up for the distance learning for tomorrow, they should go to our events page and scroll down to the events and professional development, and you can sign up for our links there. They are listed in Eastern Standard Time, so if you're up in like Orchid, just remember to subtract 3 hours from the time.
That's right. We've got several webinars this week. We've got 2 tomorrow, and then we've got 2 on Thursday that we're going to be doing with folks. So definitely take advantage of those. And of course, we have office hours as well. All right, so Janet and anyone else that may be interested, the assessment platform that you have inside TCI is going to provide you, any chapter that you go to will always provide you 2 tests right out of the chute. you'll have one in English and one in Spanish. Now, with our science and our social studies programs, when we create an assessment, we create a scaffolded assessment. So there will be DOK1, DOK2, DOK3 items on every summative assessment that we create. And you'll see that it's not a quantitative assessment, it's qualitative. So we're going to have fewer items that are on there, but this is a test that if you wanted to give as paper and pen, or you wanted to give to your students online as is, you could totally do that in English or in Spanish. The nice part is you don't have to. You can use parts of this test and make your very own. So I'm going to model that for you right now, Janet, and anyone else that might want to see that. What you do is you click Create New Test right down here, and you give your test a name. So I'm going to call this one my, we'll call this one my gifted test. All right. And then I hit Submit. Essentially, I need to do three things: insert questions, create questions, and then manage the assessment once I've done those first two. So to insert questions, really simple. You click one of the categories. I'm going to pick some questions from TCI. You can sort by response type or any of these other items over here. The questions appear here in a workspace that you can preview with just clicking the eyeball. And if you want it, then you just click the little check mark there and then add it to your test. So you pick the questions that you want that are pre-existing and add them right into your test. When you do that, you don't have to use them as is. So since I want to make this a little bit more challenging assessment, let's say it was a multiple choice item and I didn't pick one that's there. Let me go back and pick a multiple choice item. There we go. Let's pick that one right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that to my test. If I wanted to modify this assessment item, I can actually go in and I can make it so that there's more than one correct answer. So let's say second correct answer. And then they would have to select not just that one, but they'd have to select that one too. So you could totally change the questions. You can change the point values. You can add a stimulus if one was not provided, and then you can go ahead and save whatever you do there. So really easy to add existing questions. And then of course, when it comes to creating questions, we give you a variety of response types right over here, from just directions, which are prompt only, to these different response questions. And then once you create your questions, which go over here, you can drag them into any order that you want, and then you're ready to manage your test. And we give you two options. We'll never put you in a position where you have to use it in print or you have to use it online only. You'll always have the option of doing both. So you can put in page breaks, print out the test, and you're good for paper and pen, or you can go ahead and assign it to your students and then have them take it online. If they take it online, any of the closed-ended items like multiple choice and fill in the blank, those are scored automatically. Aside from that, you go in to grades, and when you view them, you give a score to the student on their open response or whatever that open-ended type item response type would be. So that's how you create a test. It's really simple. And the cool thing is when you've created your test, it'll save that one and any others that you've made. If you use our assignment tool, you can specify which test you want to assign to which student or students or classes or all of your classes. So if you wanted 5 or 6 different assessments, you can have however many that you want. And what happens is this grid where you have notebook, lesson game, and participation, for every assessment that you give in that lesson, you would get a column that would appear here, and then that's where you would go in to view individual data. So hopefully that was a quick and dirty tutorial on assessments. You may have other questions. A great place to go is right up here in Help. Just type in assessments right there at the very top. You'll get some great articles there. And the other place that you can go is if you click on professional development, we have a self-paced course for every one of the markets that we sell to. So let's say I taught elementary science. I could open up that course, and inside there, assessment and every other feature and pedagogy from TCI is covered in that self-paced course. So you've got a lot of places to go for additional information, but we definitely heard you. You might want to have a whole webinar on assessments. So I really appreciate you all spending some time with us this afternoon. And Christy and Sarah and Kimberly, thank you for your support. I want everybody to have a great day, a safe day, and we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you, Brian.
Bye, everybody.